Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari, and this week I have the most important of important questions. We all know that you can't judge a book by its cover, but can you judge it by its sprayed edges? So over the last few years, especially in book boxes, you're finding books with really decorative sprayed edges. Not necessarily just covered edges, but they got designs on them now. So I get these in book boxes and kind of like set them aside and never read them. But does having really pretty sprayed edges make a book better? Should I be reading these when I actually get them? I mean, like, obviously, yeah. But are they better because they have sprayed edges? So I've grabbed a collection of books right here with sprayed edges. And I specifically grabbed ones with colorful sprayed edges plus a design on it. But I'm going to try to read as many of them as I can in this video and just see, are they good? The first book that I'm going to read is the yellow one that you can barely see. I'm going to get this real close to the camera so you can actually see that there's a design there. It's subtle, it's hard to see, but this is This Vicious Grace by Emily Thied. I got this probably in one of the first fairy loot boxes that I ordered, and I've been interested in it since I got it. I just never actually read it. This is young adult fantasy romance about a girl whose touch has killed 3 husbands so far. She's supposed to be this like amplifier to magic. She finds a husband, a partner. They hold hands. She uses their magic to defeat these evil creatures that are coming in. And she, instead of like using their magic, she's killing them, and that's not good. She shouldn't be killing them. So people don't like this. They think that, hey, maybe if we knock off this bitch, the gods will send us a replacement for her. And so she hires a bodyguard. And then I think the romance is between her and the bodyguard. So yeah. We'll see where that goes. I have finished This Vicious Grace by Emily Thied. And so far, sprayed edges really are better books. This was fantastic. If you like fairly generic YA fantasy romance. I'm pretty sure all of the books that I have with these sprayed edges are fantasy romance. Like I said, it's a very generic YA romance, but it was very well written, very entertaining. I liked the characters. I liked the story overall. It's not like the story is not generic, the tropes are generic. So, liked it very much. I'm excited to read the second book in this, I hope, a duology. It could be a series, but at least a duology. I believe that comes out in December. But I very, very much like this, and 4 stars so far. So far, sprayed edges are better. The next sprayed edge up is The Darkening by Sunya Mara. I have finished this, I haven't read it, and while I liked it a lot, it is not as good as This Vicious Grace. So what's this about? Another generic fantasy romance, young adult fantasy romance. This follows our main character Vespa, who, shockingly enough, in all of the fantasy romance tropes, she's a young poor girl from the very edges of a society that's crumbling. And through happenstance, she gets the opportunity to become an apprentice to the prince's best friend. She hates the prince is holding her father captive, and she's using this opportunity to, you know, overthrow the prince, free her father, etc., etc. but maybe she falls in love with the prince. Just maybe she falls in love with the prince, and maybe she is the savior that the whole land is looking for, and maybe the prince isn't as much of a bad guy as she thought he was. So basically it's the same tropes as Red Queen, but a different story. So I enjoyed this, which is weird because all I have about it is complaints. I think I just really like brainless YA fantasy romances, and most of the time I can look past their flaws. Even though I like make note of their flaws, the flaws don't really ruin my enjoyment because I don't really expect anything of this. So flaws. The biggest issue with this thing is why. Like, just the question why all throughout. Why are these two people falling in love? There's no reason. Like, there's no reason on page that these two people should like each other at all. Why is she trying to rescue her father? Because her father doesn't seem to like her at all, and he seems kind of emotionally abusive. So why does she even care enough to try to rescue this man? Why is this the entire plot of the book? Why do they choose to do a lot of the things that they do? Because none of it makes sense. Their actions, their reasonings, none of it makes sense. Doesn't seem to matter. It's just like a convenient that it all works out in the end. And I'm kind of enjoying that it all works out in the end. I really liked the Red Queen series, and because this reminds me so much of that, I think I'm fine just looking past all of like the convenience of how everything turns out and the lack of like actual reasoning for anybody's actions or feelings, that I'm just like, yeah, okay. So, like, high 3-star, low 4-star. I don't know that I would actually recommend this to anybody unless you really liked the Red Queen series, but most people don't. I just have this special place in my heart for really stupid fantasy romance. As far as like smut level in this goes, they kiss. That's like the max that they do it here. It's very actual YA tame. But yeah, I'm gonna put this in the yes, sprayed edges do make this better category, and go on to the next book. I did manage to find one book with sprayed edges that was not young adult fantasy romance, and that is Poster Girl by Veronica Roth. This is adult sci-fi dystopian. This is a futuristic Seattle. Our main character was the literal poster girl for a 1984-esque Big Brother type government that fell about 10 years prior to the events of this book. Her family was very high up in the echelons of this government, and everybody who was, you know, important to the government is now in prison or has been in prison for the last 10 years, if not, you know, killed in the rebellion. So she's been in prison for the last 10 years with like friends and family and people she grew up with. Her entire family's dead. And the new government has decided that anybody under the age of 16 who has been in this, who's been in prison for the last 10 years is going to be released because they were children and they weren't really responsible for the bad, like the horrible actions of the government. They were just the children of the government's leaders. But she is 17, or she was 17 when this fell down, so she doesn't get that opportunity. Instead, she is given like a mission where she has to find a missing child in order to win her freedom, which doesn't make any sense at all. Like, that whole plot line doesn't make sense. Why somebody who's been in prison for 10 years is going to find a child that the government can't find if she's let out on a day pass for like 12 hours a day, plus she's like the literal poster girl of this regime. Like, everybody knows her face. Like, that didn't make sense to me. But That's basically the plot of this, is like the mystery of finding this little girl and like blah 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 blah. It goes from there. I'm not really going to spoil it in case you want to read this. The question is, did the sprayed edges make it better? And for this one I'm going to say no. For the most part, this was kind of a boring story to me. It was very slow paced, and I don't think this was Veronica Roth's intention, but it kind of reads like not all Nazis were bad. It reads like alt-right propaganda. It does. And like I said, I don't think that's her intention. Like, anything that I can find about her as an author online doesn't really fit with the alt-right. Veronica Roth is the author of like the Divergent series, if her name sounded familiar but you couldn't replace her. But yeah, it just, like, the whole thing kind of gave me the ick. So yeah, I don't think I would recommend this to anybody. And I'm gonna give it like a 2-star maybe. So apparently only fantasy romance with sprayed edges is good so far. I'm gonna move on to something else. I think I'm gonna get the book that I have that I think has the prettiest sprayed edges. I think that's what we're gonna read next. I'll be back when that's done. All right, the prettiest sprayed edges I currently own belong to this book, which is Spice Road by Maya Ibrahim, I believe is how you say her name. This is a young adult, and the town that she lives in, or the kingdom that she lives in, is cut off from the rest of the world by a desert filled with monsters. They are guardians of magic that is sometimes called spice and sometimes called something else that I can't remember. Her brother has gone missing, presumed dead, and then she finds out that he has like left their kingdom, traveled into the rest of the world, and joined like rebels or resistance army, something like that. And then her and another in a group of shields, or you know, fighters, have to go and retrieve him. I DNF'd this one. I am almost 200 pages and 160 pages, 14 chapters in, DNF'd it. The main character is insufferable. She is an entitled rich kid, big Nepo baby vibes going on in here, and she thinks she is being bullied, but she is really the bully. And I'm not interested enough in the plot of the story to get past this character. And I'm sure the whole point of the story is she's going to go on this adventure to save her brother and kind of grow and learn and realize that, hey, maybe I'm the bad guy. But I don't care. I'm not engaged enough to get to that point. The love interest is the guy that she's been bullying for years, or the guy she considers her bully. So it's definitely like a hate to love type of romance. I couldn't imagine like these people in their relationship ever falling in love for any like legitimate reason. So yeah, like I'm sure it happens, but I'm not on board with this. So this one's not for me. The writing's fine, so if you get past these characters, I know a lot of people don't mind reading from awful characters, but I hate reading from awful characters. I like unlikable characters, but not awful characters, if that makes sense. So this isn't looking good for us. That the prettiest book I have is a DNF. This is my first DNF. I'm actually kind of surprised. I expected to DNF a lot more of these, but I've enjoyed them mostly so far. So I'm not too mad that this is the first DNF. Hopefully it's the only DNF, and hopefully we can get like 1 or 2 more books in here. Our next sprayed edge. Very, very pretty. This is Twin Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Weber. This was the last book with decorated sprayed edges. I have like some just solid color sprayed edges left. But last book with decorated sprayed edges left on my TBR from 2022 or older. So I definitely wanted to get this done. I'm trying to read as many books as I possibly can off of that TBR this year. So, this one, fantasy romance. I know we're shocked. This is about 2 sisters, twins, separated at birth. This is a country where witches are feared and hated and, you know, murdered. You got like the Salem witch trials kind of vibe thing going on. Somebody accused from a witch, just because somebody wants something they have, doesn't like them, they're like a loner, they get killed off without any real proof of witchiness, but there are actual witches who can like actually do magic. So you've got the one sister who is being raised in the castle, hates witches, all of that fun stuff. And then you have the other sister who was stolen by witches and raised by witches, to like overthrow the kingdom, I guess. So basically what happens is the witchy sister and her accomplices kidnap the royal sister, and she switches places with them in order to gain the crown. And then you have like alternating chapters between each sister. It's kind of cool because it does have 2 authors, so you get a very distinct difference between the sisters because they're obviously written by 2 separate people. I really like this at the start. I was very into it. The chapters are very short, which I definitely appreciate. And the story seemed, you know, interesting, but this was way too long. About halfway through I was done. I wasn't interested anymore. The story just felt repetitive. Nothing was happening. Like, I knew where this was going and I just wasn't interested. So definitely too long. Both sisters have their separate romances with different guys, but the romances weren't front and center. Like, both sisters made choices that weren't based on their love interest. They are making choices based on their personalities before they met these guys and not choosing to be with these men to sacrifice their like original missions, which you see a lot in YA fantasy romance. So I appreciate that that didn't do that at all. But overall, 3 stars. Not the worst book I've read so far in this, and not the best. I have 2 books left. They're both pretty short. They both have very pretty sprayed edges, if this will focus. I think it will. Yes. I don't know. This one, there's a little pterodactyl in there that I thought was cool, but both have very pretty sprayed edges. Both are fairly short, and I have time for probably 1 more book. I think I'm gonna go with this one instead of this one because the plot of this one sounds more interesting. Neither one of them sound great, but out of the 2, this one sounds better. So hopefully this is good and we can end this video on a good note. Last book, last sprayed edges. First off, I want to say how pretty this book is underneath the dust jacket. I love this. This makes me so happy. How pretty is that? So I'm gonna be bold enough to say this is not fantasy romance. And apologies for the snoring dog in the background. This is fantasy, kind of a more realistic fantasy. Like, this could be set in our world, but isn't. Basically, what had happened was 100 years prior to this book, people started having nightmares, and if you had a nightmare, you became your nightmare. Some people are like conscious, keep their own minds, and some people become like mindless beast. So you have anything from people turning into like vampires to people becoming giant spiders and eating their loved ones. all of the above is possible. So in this city, everybody kind of like takes medication to make sure you don't dream, so you can't have a nightmare and then become your nightmare. But it is not super effective, and there's nightmares everywhere. Also, the city itself is very corrupt. This very much reminded me of like Gotham in the Batman universe, where like everything is bad. It's super freaking corrupt. Nothing is good. And our main character has her fear is of nightmares. She has like an irrational fear of nightmares, a huge phobia. And while she can sit there and like, no, like this person, yes, is a nightmare. They've changed. They still got their mind. They're still completely human, but I have a fear of that. And she also lives with a cult for protection. Because she has a hard time functioning with this irrational fear. Think like agoraphobia. It's kind of a mystery, kind of like a exploration of her trying to overcome her fears, and it's a lot ridiculous. Like, this is goofy in like the best way. This is definitely not a book you want to go in taking seriously, because it's not serious. It's ridiculous. But I very much enjoyed this. This is a 4-star easily for me. So I'm glad that I picked this one, and we started out on a really good note and ended on a really good note. So these are all of the sprayed edges that I read in this week's little adventure. Did we learn anything? Not really. These were various levels of good. I had DNFs, I had 2 stars up to 4 stars. The prettier ones, the prettier edges weren't necessarily any better. Basically, you can't judge a book by its sprayed edges, just like you can't judge a book by its cover. This pile is really heavy, so I'm going to set it down. Thank you for watching this video with me. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought. If there are any other ways that I could judge book that you'd like to see me try. And I will see you in the next video. Next week's video is going to be July's TBR, so definitely come and check that out.